Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders with Marketing Huddle, and today we have with us Bob Bethel, and he specializes in maximizing profitability. Bob, welcome to the program.
Mike, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And I know your claim to fame or nice moniker that you use is you've turned around 77 organizations, firms successfully. So I'm assuming there's a link between maximizing profitability and your turnaround focus. So give us a little bit of a background on yourself and what led you to focus on becoming a specialist in turnarounds.
Well, Mike, I grew up in a marketing family, was exposed to it at a very early age. My father was manager of the largest Ford dealership in Nashville, Tennessee, all of his life. So sales was a way of life for us, and he put me on the wash rack of that large dealership when I was 10 years old, and I learned it from the ground up. Because of that, I went into business for myself as soon as I got out of college, and started an automobile dealership in a small town in Tennessee, and did extremely well for a couple of years. And then I found out exactly how ignorant I was. We went into a recession, and I fought it like crazy for a couple of years, and finally threw in the towel. Lost everything I had because I'd made very good money, invested it in some farms and other things, and I lost everything. When you sign that personal guarantee, you don't really realize what all that means. But as it turned out, all these years later, it was a big blessing, because a friend of my parents, who was one of the wealthiest men in Middle Tennessee, kind of picked me up and dusted me off and said, "I think you've learned a lot fighting this. I have retired from my businesses, and the people who are running them are not doing a good job. Several of them are in trouble, and I'd like for you to take them over." And I did, and I cleaned them up, fell back into the good graces of the banking community, and started getting calls to take over failing businesses. That was 50 years ago, and I'm still doing it. Obviously, when a bank has a non-performing loan, they want to get rid of it as quick as possible, and it allowed me to take over millions of dollars worth of assets with no capital, if I could make them work. So that's what I've done. That's what I've been doing, and I love doing it. And I have taken over businesses in 25 different industries. Never taken one to bankruptcy court. Returned all of them to profitability, and in so doing, being able to turn those around has saved 10,000 jobs in my lifetime.
Yeah, a couple of questions pop into mind, but one of the first ones is your last statement there. You did not say, "and that has given me and my family multiple millions of dollars in yachts and boats." No, you talked about the impact you're making in the people's lives, and that's a big gold star there, because if you were a selfish, capitalistic approach to that, you would probably have some losses because you'd be taking undue risk. But you realize that these are people and lives and families, and I love that approach.
Well, thank you, and let me say this: because I grew up totally surrounded by sales and a sales-oriented family because my mother was part of it, because she supported Dad in so many ways, helping him with sales, that I think I came to realize, and real quickly, when obviously at my age, when I started working on the wash rack, I think minimum wage was $1.15 an hour. My best friend's father was governor of Tennessee at that time, and I went to Dad at age 14 when I realized that his salesmen back then were making $100 or more every time they sold a car, and here I am making $1.15 an hour. And I said, I'd like to sell cars. And Dad said, well, you can't, because you've got to be 21 and get a license from the state. So I picked up the phone, called the governor's office, and told him I was making $1.15. Of course, I was around him on a daily basis because of his son. And I said, I need a salesman's license. And he said, I'm going to have my secretary call the commissioner, and she'll call you back. And in about an hour of Dad telling me that I couldn't sell because I didn't have a license, I in fact had a license. So he put me on the junk lot where I worked in the afternoon after school and on Saturdays. And by the time I got to college, Mike, the average Tennessee family income was around $6,500. In my 4 years of college, I never made less than $30,000. So when you say my focus isn't on money, I think one of the great things about being in sales is the fact that if you work at it, you realize very quickly that you can make money. So that's never been an issue, and I think it comes from being brought up in sales.
Yeah. Well, but at the same time, we could be talking to someone that said, I grew up in sales, I was brought up in sales, and, I'm sure we can even think of people even that we see online or social media that you would point to and say, I don't know much about this person personally, but boy, they are just a beast in sales, and they leave carnage, and they're like a bull in a china closet. And then contrast that with some of the ways that you're mentioning, and even, you factor in like Bob Berg, the go-giver, and just that kind of mindset and approach. It really does pay off. I would say, I would feel that you've talked to some young salespeople over your career that you've mentioned this to, and they go, yeah, but... that's fine for you to say because at your point in the career, but boy, when I'm starting off, how am I supposed to give and serve and not be pushy and I got to make a buck and make the commission. And it's just that fine line where people can smell commission breath, as they say.
Well, Mike, Dad used to love saying that we're all on commission. Most of us just don't know it.
Yeah.
And that is a very true statement. And I know you as well as myself have talked to lots of young people who were eager to go out and make their way in the world and make a fortune. And I'm sorry to say, most of them, when they listen, it's sort of like the rich man in the Bible that was told, get rid of your money and go out and do good, and that saddened him.
Yep, because he's like, I got a lot of it.
Yeah. And
yeah.
I find the same thing. When everything's said and done, there are an awful lot of people who simply are not willing to pay the price, whatever that is.
Exactly. One thing when you were giving your explanation of, the 50-year plus span, did you happen to keep some type of notes from back when you first started where you could refer back to now and say, I was giving this advice to businesses and taking this approach to businesses, and boy, that has remained true over the last 50 years, or looking at it and saying, boy, that was working okay then, but look at where we've really amplified what I was just scratching the surface when I gave that piece of advice. Any thoughts that way from, that large career span?
I can't believe that you asked that, because no one has ever asked that. But the fact of the matter is, after I got out of school, it was 1966, I bought my first daytimer. And I put all of those notes in there. As a matter of fact, it was the background for a lot of the things in the book. But I put those things in there, and I have kept those things over the years. And yes, it's very interesting to go back and see how things have changed or how things have worked out.
I'm only 49, but I still remember using a daytimer, and the ones that had the little top right corner that you perforate, you tear off, and you know where you are, and and I still have a few of mine from back in maybe I forget, maybe early 90s, late 80s. But can you think of one instance where you were reviewing through that and you picked up on a principle that still is remaining true now, that that you didn't really know it back then, that was a great principle, but now it stood the test of time?
Well, yes, I can, because I think about it very often, and that was something that my father used to say in sales meetings, and that was, in high-ticket items, it takes 100 contacts to equal one prospect, and it takes 100 prospects to equal one sale. So don't look down and get sad because you haven't sold anything. Ask yourself, what have you done to generate those contacts, and what have you done to generate those potential sales? And that remains true today, whether we're using the internet, whatever our sales motivation is. And Mike, let me say this. In these 77 businesses that I've taken over, and anyone who reads the book may in fact be shocked to find that there is nothing about sales and marketing in the book, Strengthen Your Business. And the reason behind that is, in all 77 of these businesses that have failed, number one, you would think, since I buy businesses that have failed, that they would be in decline. The fact of the matter is, every single one of them was in a growth mode. And I see a parallel between that and you and I getting in a Ferrari this morning at the foot of Pikes Peak and going up that mountain at 10 miles an hour. I dare say, whether you or I were driving it, we'd make it to the top. Now, if we were told, take it up that mountain at 170 miles an hour, I've got a feeling I know what would happen if I were driving. And the same thing happens. Same thing happens to businesses. And Dad used to say, and many of his friends used to say, there are very few businesses who are prepared to sell on a daily basis. And I have witnessed that in all of these 77 businesses. First of all, a lot of entrepreneurs, be it an engineering company or whatever, have a very low regard for marketing and sales. I have heard numerous times over the years walking through a company to ask, now, who's that lady over there, or who's that guy over there, and be told, especially in the technical companies I've taken over, oh, that's just a salesperson. And so when I take over a business, I look around and ask myself, are they prepared for marketing and sales? And every single time, Mike, the answer has been no.
It reminds me, I read a book, I'm pretty sure that this quote came from the book Jeffrey Gitomer wrote about Patterson's principles, and it sticks in my mind, this quote, because he said, build capacity in advance of demand.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, sir. Period.
Mm-hmm. Because you can implode. If you do too much too fast and you've got the support staff internal team that cannot handle it and they don't have a process to scale up and handle that, now you've not only missed out on sales, but you've upset the sales you got because you can't deliver and all of that whole domino effect. So I think that's a really big piece. That's really a good, when you mention I go in and I look for can they handle it, that's a really big thing. And I would suspect that if you talk to CEO or owners, they would, of course, say, well, of course we can handle it. But I'm
yes.
sure you find sometimes different.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So what do you think some important things a business owner needs to keep in mind to prevent their business from failing? We've touched on a few of these, but what are a couple, three things that someone could kind of put in a bullet point and keep in mind?
Well, Mike, as you and I both know, 50% of all businesses fail. And personally, I think that's a national disgrace for those of us in the business community. And here's what I have found in all 77 of these businesses. One, not one of them has had a plan. And I'm not talking, Mike, about a Harvard business plan. What we do on day one, and let me just run through this real quickly. What we do on day one when we take over a company is we have a company-wide meeting, every single employee. We take the phones off the hook, lock the doors, and I share the good, the bad, the ugly. Because, number one, business owners typically do not share financial information with their employees. Now, how on earth can I expect people to help me on a journey if they don't know where we are? So number one is we share all of the information. Number two, we tell them that we're going to create a plan, not our Harvard business plan, but a 90-day, kind of like a football game plan. Mike, I'm a pilot. We file flight plans. Watch any football game on Saturday. You'll see the coach has a game plan. So I explained to them, we're going to create a 90-day plan. We're going to break it into 30-day segments and then break it into weekly segments. And we're going to set a goal and a budget for that. And that then is our game plan. And we're going to, in that game plan, we're going to lay out who is going to do what, to whom, when, and for how much. So it's totally clear to everyone that we're all pulling the rope the same way.
What happens when that is made? Because I love that idea, that concept, that strategy. It's non-existent in businesses, I'm confident of. But what happens when that meeting breaks and the employees kind of go back to the water cooler and go, all right, let's give this 2 weeks, or they don't follow it to the T? Does the hammer fall to keep them back in line to say, well, hey, you were responsible for this deliverable. It didn't get done. And if it's not kind of, addressed, disciplined, or handled, well, then now it just falls apart. So what do you do to make sure that they implement that?
Well, here's what I've found. First of all, in each of these businesses, I've asked the owner, do the employees know the condition of the company? And every single one of them, it's almost instantaneous. Oh, goodness, no. If they knew that, all leave. Well, number one, I've never had an employee leave when we exposed them to the truth and the facts. Number two, it's sort of like President Roosevelt said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. So what I've found is your employees know if a business is not doing well. Whether you tell them or not, they know it. So when you expose them to the truth and the fact, most of the time I have people come up and say, we knew the company was in trouble, but we thought it was a lot worse. Now, when when they see, and by the way, it's not my plan. I'm new to the company. I'm using the expertise of the employees to put that plan together of how we're going to make this company profitable. That information has been hidden from them. So obviously when that meeting is over, several things happen, Mike, and one is as you're going through the fact that the company has $15 million worth of debt and we're in default, you get a lot of deer in the headlight looks. But when you tell them the company can, in fact, be saved, the company can, in fact, maximize its profitability, and we together are going to come up with this plan. So the plan is number one. Number two, I tell them starting today, we're going to measure ourselves daily. And I bring in several whiteboards, and as a group, we determine that includes the janitor, because a fallacy that I see in most business owners, they think it's their company. It's not their company. It's everyone's company, and I'm not a communist or a socialist, but my point is this. Every person getting a paycheck is dependent on that company. They are dependent on paying their rent or mortgage, feeding their family, clothing their family, educating their family. So they're owners too. They're vested. And as I say, I've never had anyone leave because nobody wants to go out and look for a job. Nobody wants to say the company I worked for failed, because will some of that rub off on them, or were they part of the failure? So, second thing, we determine how is it we're going to measure. If sales, revenue is the best way to measure, okay, fine. If we're a manufacturing facility, maybe we want to measure both sales and units produced that day, but the team determines that. Then, every single day, we have someone post that board with today's result. And Mike, it's the greatest motivator. We don't put it in an accounting office. We put it out where every employee can see it every single day. And it's the best silent motivator I've ever seen for a team, because if we're going to measure and we need to produce 1,000 units, then that's going to be our hard line on that chart. And each day we'll post where we are against that plan.
And, I heard that type of example once, where something to the effect of this manufacturing plant wanted to get more production out of their crew, and they were just button heads, and couldn't get figured out. And one day someone came in, and as the night shift was leaving or morning shift was arriving, they noticed on the ground as they entered into the facility, the plant, this big chalk number like 19, let's say. And they're like, what in the world's 19? And they said, well, the crew before you turned out 19 units, and that's the number to be. That's the new bar. And as the story goes, something to the effect of, the record before that was 17, and so they're like, oh well, we can do 19. And then now all of a sudden it started pulling them as opposed to pushing them.
Yes, and I saw that exact example in South Georgia at a manufacturing facility that manufactured mobile offices. And it was a new plant. It had never done well, and they had 3 production lines at that plant. And I knew the guy that took it over, and he did precisely that for a week. That's all he did, didn't say a word, and it worked marvelously. So yes, silent motivators are great things.
Because when you push someone, even physically walk up to someone and push on their hands, they push back. So it's just natural that if you're being forceful or pushing someone, but yet when you implement what you mentioned, which is getting the team together and saying this is our company and here's what we need to do and look at the dire straits we're in, but we can pull out of it. Now everyone's banding together. So we've just really touched on so many wonderful points. Let's wrap up with this. I see on your website, your book, there's a really wonderful line that I just love, where it says, these are not theories in the book, but instead practical steps that can be implemented in any business today, right now, without cost. So if that doesn't make you want to go out and buy the book, then I don't know what will. So what's the best way that people can reach out, learn more about you, as well as pick up a copy of your book?
My website is robertthomasbethel.com, and the book just went on sale last week at Amazon.
Excellent. Excellent. So strengthen your business, and your website, robertthomasbethel.com. Well, Bob, it's really been wonderful getting to know you. I think I could sit here for hours on end, listen to some stories from over the last 50-plus years. So just really, really enjoyed getting to know you. Thanks for coming on.
Well, thank you so much, Mike.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.